Good morning, everyone. We're ready to get started here. Welcome to 6 Steps to Build a Business You Can Sell. Thank you for joining us, and we are ready to get started here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask each of you, if you would, in the chat to put your name, your company name, your industry, and what do you most want to learn about today. I will do my best to talk about in more depth the various things that people want to hear about, so we can make sure we provide some value to everybody here in the webinar. Now, with that, while you're typing that in, let me introduce a little bit about us. Action Coach is a large corporation. We're the world's #1 business coaching firm with more than 1,000 coaching offices in 70 different countries worldwide. It was originally started up in 1993 and remains privately owned and founded by Brad Sugars. And we operate with a group vision: world abundance through business reeducation. And world abundance in our kind of thinking relates to a couple of things. One is certainly the wealth of business owners, but secondarily, as they grow wealth, they need to grow teams. And so the ability to employ more people who have good employment is a big piece of this. So that's what we're striving for. Everything we do is wrapped around that vision. We currently coach over 15,000 businesses each week across all 70 countries. Predominant countries would be the USA, the UK, Australia, New Zealand, Malaysia, Vietnam, and all those other countries. So a little bit about myself. I grew up in Rochester, New York. I was actually born in this area, but I grew up in Rochester, New York. I have an electrical engineering degree from Clarkson University. And much later, after a technical career, I picked up an MSBA from Bucknell University. Since then, I spent 20 years running small business units for large manufacturing corporations. The last business unit I operated grew 300% in 3 years. Much of the context of what I'm going to talk about today will come from not only the systems that Action Coach provides, but my own personal experience in running those business units. It was about 5 different business units over those 20 years. I've been a business coach, a mentor, and a trainer since June of 2010. And my goal is to provide proven, actionable systems and tools that any business owner can implement into their business and try to help them create amazing results from that effort. I have a purpose. My purpose today is to reward your time. You've invested time with me. My purpose is to reward your time with the simplest, fastest, and easiest ways to increase your sales, free up your time, create an amazing team so that you can build your business and be able to sell it at a price you want. So that's our goal today, is we're going to talk about systems and tools that facilitate your ability to create a business that you can sell at a great price, preferably. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about the agenda for today, the things I intend to talk about. We're going to do these 4 basic things. We're going to talk about mindset first, and it really is all about mindset. And this is really the key to everything, is going into this process with the right mindset. Then next, we're going to identify key parameters that will help a business owner get the best value from their business. Then we're going to describe a path of systems that can help an owner achieve those parameters to get to whatever level he wants to. And then I'll offer you a way that I can help you get through that process. So that's what we're going to talk about today. If at any time you've got questions or want to ask something or want to offer an idea or an observation that you've made, please put it into the chat. Feel free to share. This does not have to be a one-way conversation, and I will do my best to answer questions and share with you what it is you would most want to learn today. So I said we're going to talk about mindset. We're going to start with a point of power. If you think of that yellow circle as a point of power, then we can talk about behaviors. And there are a set of behaviors that fit below the point of power. If you look at blame, excuses, and denial, think about in your experience what kind of outcomes, what kinds of results those kinds of behaviors get us. Do we get empowerment, or do we find ourselves really just getting sympathy, if that? Alternatively, thank you, Jeff. We will do our best to get you going in the direction. Some of the material that we're going to talk about in a little bit, we will talk about business plan components. And so I will do my best to assemble how that might look as we go. So if we look at the alternative behaviors that we can think of as taking ownership, holding ourselves accountable, and being responsible for doing things, are those the behaviors and the mindset that gets us the empowerment we need in order to achieve big goals? So if you kind of think about these, if we can steer ourselves more to those behaviors above the point than below the point, then we can reward ourselves with the outcomes that we're looking for. Now, it's one thing to think about ownership, accountability, and responsibility, but we actually have to act on it. So we have to find ways to get ourselves outside the comfort zone that we ordinarily find ourselves in. So we have to be pushing the envelope of our comfort zone in order to achieve things that we've never achieved before. And there's an old saying that if you want the same results, keep doing things the same way you're always doing them. So with that thought in mind, we want to get to the thought that the only failure is the failure to participate. That means you actually have to do stuff, step out and get stuff done. We often get into a situation where we feel that we know what's going to happen. We've seen this before, and I just know that doesn't work, or I just know it works this way. And yet, somebody else has been able to demonstrate success doing other things other ways. And what that often means is we haven't quite figured out something about what they've done. So oftentimes it's a good idea to get rid of the I know feeling, replace it with a thinking process. Isn't that interesting? It's new data. How can that new data apply to my situation? What is there about that I can use that helps me get a next step moving forward? So if we can work with those kind of mindsets, we can take ourselves to places that we've never been before. Now, what I hope to help you achieve today, perhaps, is a few blinding flashes of the obvious, new ideas that give you new ways to step forward towards goals that you've got in mind. Now, there's some really interesting thought about goals. Many people set goals based on whatever they're at right now, as opposed to really setting way out their goals that they could never figure out how to get there, but they set the goal anyway, and then work towards finding out how to get there. And that's what we'll hope to work on today. So a little bit of rules here. I'm going to ask you to turn off any mobile phones unless you're watching this webinar on your mobile phone. Turn the mobile phones off so that we don't have any additional distractions. And I'm going to periodically ask questions, and I'm going to ask that you provide the answer. We're going to use the chat box for that today. So let's get into a little bit of the next thought here. Most business owners only really ever have a job. Now, what's a job? A job is an activity that you do that you achieve a wage for. And that's cool if that's all you ever hoped to have. Of course, you could ask the question, why not have a job that somebody else has to do all this hard work? But if all you're looking for is a week-to-week, month-to-month income, that's cool. But if you think about what a business owner situation offers, it's a lot more than that. We're going to talk a little bit in the next few slides about what that might mean. But a business owner has multiple opportunities to create real wealth and an awesome lifestyle. But it takes changing a mindset from that of a wage or a monthly income to something a lot more significant than that in a much bigger perspective. There aren't a lot of people who succeed at that because there aren't a lot of people who really focus at it in that way. So let's talk a little bit about how business owners make money. Let's start with that. So there are three basic ways business owners make money for themselves, not for the business, but for themselves. We'll get into the business in a bit. First of all, they take wages. Now, we talked about a job. That's what wages come from, is they come from doing work in a job. Now, sometimes they pay themselves a wage. Sometimes they call it a draw. They take it at odd times. Sometimes they mix money between themselves and the business. That still masquerades as a draw. They still are taking money out of the business for the work that they did. Now, another way to take money would, according to accounting principles, not tax principles, but accounting principles, talks about dividends. These are things taken from net profits after all wages are paid. Now, in the mechanical world, and mechanical meaning this is how people actually run their business, they often confuse taking money from net profits with wages. What they're really doing is compensating themselves for the labor that they did within their business. So they think they take it after all the expenses are paid, therefore it must be from profits, but that's not completely true because they hadn't paid themselves the wages that they earned. The third way that a business makes money is capital gains. This sounds fancy, but it's really about what happens if and when you sell your business. The capital gains comes from the gains over debt that's in the business at the time of the sale. And this can be a large number or it can be a small number. And we're going to talk a little bit about the ways this happens just in a minute. But the capital gains can be significant to an owner if he designs his business to look that way. So this has to be by intent. This doesn't very often happen by accident. It does happen by intent. So when a business owner exits, there are about 6 categories of ways that they can get out of the business. A very common way is to sell it to somebody in the family. Now, the word sell is presumptuous in some ways. They have any number of ways of calling it a sale. It's a transition, it's a hand it off, it's a this, it's a that. In reality, it's a sale. And most of the time, the owner that's disposing of the business to a family member is expecting to receive something in return. That might be a monthly or quarterly kind of income that they're anticipating that the family member will continue to pay them through retirement. That's still in concept a sale. They could sell it to management. And this is a similar kind of transaction or a similar kind of scenario. They might take a note and the management will continue to pay them through time for whatever amount of money for whatever period of time. In whatever case, these two are very, very similar to each other, in which case you are trusting whoever you transferred it to be able to continue to run the business. And what many times happens in both of these is the owner has most of the knowledge of the business history and how it came about and how it succeeds in their heads. And so in many cases, the owner winds up still there, still sharing information, still working with the team, if you will, to help them through, and never really completely gets away. And I do know a couple of cases that have been successful, but by and large, most of the ones required the owner to either come back or to provide a fair amount of consulting activity to the team that took it over. Now, the next way that happens is a sale to a third party at a random, unplanned, or planned period of time, but still the owner winds up having to stay with the business for a period of time, trying to train the new buyer how to take over, with his final payment dependent on the business reaching a particular milestone at a particular period of time, which may or may not happen and may or may not be completely in his control. The fourth way is to plan ahead with a significant run-up period where the owner builds the business to a stage that he or she can actually be absentee. And what that means is they're not there for day-to-day operation. They're able to be someplace else so that they have confidence that the management team has all of the knowledge needed in order to not only maintain the business, but actually grow and evolve the business into the future, usually towards a predefined vision. Then he's in position to sell it clean, walk away, and not have to have a long-term relationship with that business if he doesn't want it. That opens up all kinds of opportunities. And by the way, this is actually the means of the highest multiple, and we'll talk about what that means in a minute, but the highest value that the owner can possibly get is to be able to get the business to where he is absentee and allow and to sell it and allow the next owner to take it over completely with a clean transaction. The last two methods are what happens if none of that happens. It's a liquidation. This is usually at the very small end business where there isn't enough value for anybody to want to buy. And the two different ways that can happen is either unplanned or planned. If it's planned, usually you can get some value because you can find buyers for the inventory and buyers for the various assets in a good way and get a reasonable value for it. Or the owner passes away, the business gets liquidated by the estate because they don't want to run the business. And it's in essence a fire sale, and a much lower value comes from that. So all exits basically fit into those 6 categories. The question is, which one do you want yours to be in? And how do you want to go about driving your business so that you can get the most from it for the efforts that you've put into driving it so far? Now, to put a little context to that, 96% of businesses never make it past $1 million of revenue. And only 0.4% of businesses make it past 10 million of revenue. Now, why is that important? Well, 10 million revenue is typically where a business can start to provide a decent valuation and a decent multiple for an owner who wants to sell. This is about the size that a business will need to be in most cases for an absentee scenario to be plausible. Now, it could be 8, it could be 15, but that's about where it begins. That doesn't mean there aren't $100 million businesses where the owner is running it day to day. There are certainly many of those. Those are cases where the owner has chosen not to relinquish control. That's okay. That's a choice, but he is sacrificing a certain amount of the multiple that goes with it for whatever reason. Sometimes it's ego, sometimes there's other considerations, and sometimes he just doesn't want to. That's a choice, but again, he's missing out on value by leaving it in that way. That said, 70% of businesses put up for sale never do. Both of these little tidbits come from the business brokers I've met, talking to them. All of them seem to come to the same conclusions around those numbers. And so those are some things to think about as you're setting your goals. How do you choose where you're trying to get to? Do you want to be just earning an income on a month-to-month basis? Or do you, for the work that you've put in to learn how to do things beyond just the craft, things like getting customers, things like making sure the customers are served, things like making sure you got the right amount of money in the bank. There's a lot of effort that goes into being good at those things. Are you going to let that just kind of disappear and go to waste? Or do you want to try to earn something for that effort? And so those are somewhat the choices that an owner can make at that stage. Now, there are 7 key factors that affect the sell price of a business. And I've chosen deliberately not to number these because they're not in any real specific order, but the color code kind of relates to categories of where we are in the process. The first is the value of the inventory. The second is the value of property and equipment as compared to the debt. Now, those two factors, those 2 key factors, really relate to what a liquidation value could lead to. That's really all that's covered in a liquidation sale is the value of the inventory, the value of property, equipment, and paying off the debt. The next caliber of sale gets to the sale to a third party. And that's where we start talking about free cash flow. The EBITDA is a technical term in accounting, earnings before interest, dividends, taxes, and appreciation. So this is a factor, and most people, when brokers talk about multiples, this is the number that they're talking about. This relates to net profit. So net profit excluding the impact of interest, dividends, taxes, and amortization. That's because the buyer, whoever the buyer is, will have a different financial situation, so they'll have a different number. And this is all they're looking at is operating income, operating profit, if you will. Now, the next phase is receivables, payables, and whatever other working capital might be required. In essence, a buyer has to write 2 checks. One is a check to the seller, and the other is a check to finance the business so that it continue to run. And the more the bigger the check to finance the working capital to operate the business, the smaller the check he's going to pay to the seller. So these are considerations to go into when you're talking to a broker or you're trying to negotiate a sale on your own. These are factors to consider. Now then, if you really want a high multiple, up to this point, the multiples we're talking about in typical scenarios range anywhere from 2 to 5, let's say, something in that order of magnitude. Now, if you can take it to another stage where the business runs on the systems and under management other than the owner. Remember, I mentioned absentee owner. This is where the absentee owner factor comes in. If you can get it to run on systems, then the owner yourself doesn't have to be there. That by itself increases the multiples. The next factor is scalability. Now, this can mean a lot to a lot of different kind of people, but good ways to think about it is whatever the production process is easily teachable to employees. Is the product valuable to customers and hard to find? Is the product or service reoccurring, where people come back over and over and over again? A barbershop is a very classic case of that. You come back every so many weeks, over and over and over again, if you do good service. That's a form of scalability because it keeps customers coming back and it's easy to add on new customers to it. And then the last factor is future growth opportunity. These are all subjective. These are not easily quantitative. These are subjective in the mind of the buyer. The more you can set your business up as a product that a buyer would be very attractive to what you've got going on here, the higher the multiple can be, and the multiples can be pretty significant. We can get into 10s and 12s under those kinds of scenarios. In the Washington, D.C. area, there is potential for a couple of other factors that can jump in here. If you're in the high-tech field, if you're in the government contracting field, and this gets into some narrow cases, if you're in the technology field and somebody else highly, highly, highly values the technology, the magic technology that you've invented, then your numbers can go up because they're trying to buy that technology over and above what you've created here. That can increase the multiples, but really only if you've passed these gates already. The other one is if you've built a very highly skilled team in a very highly desirable skill set that relates again to a government contracting or high-tech kind of field. There are businesses that fit into this. The multiples tend to go up. But again, the better the system is on running on systems, the more likely it is that you're going to be able to make that kind of a transition. But those are the variables that you want to be thinking about. What we're going to be talking about further into this program is how to create these kinds of things. But I want to start with a context. This is where your goals need to be thinking about if you really want to get value from your business. Now, let's think about your business. Is your business driving you? Are you the slave of your business? Or are you driving it? That last one is really thinking like an absentee owner scenario. Any business can be operated in an absentee manner if it's built to the stage where there's a team who knows the systems, and this means documented. If they know the systems, they know them well, and the systems work well, then the owner can drive an organization to where he can be absentee. Otherwise, he's going to be a slave to it. And I see this all the time. We're going to talk about what it takes to be not a slave here in a couple of minutes. So think about the way you've just thought of a successful business. Personally, I tend to look at a successful business as a commercial, profitable enterprise that works without the owner. Does that sound a little bit like an absentee owner scenario? If the owner doesn't have to be there, if the venture is profitable and growing, doesn't that give the owner the most opportunities to live a life that they want to live? How many more, if they really, really, really like the process of building businesses, how many more businesses could they build if they did it again, and then again, and then again? What would their wealth look like? That's another way to think about this. It doesn't have to be sold. It could be operated as a passive income just as well. It gives you choices. But if you build it for the ability to sell it, Then you've got the choice of what do I actually do? Do I sell or I continue to receive a passive income? So that's the way I tend to look at a successful business. Now, defining what to you is a successful business is kind of like a commitment to going up to the top of Mount Everest. And climbing Mount Everest, as you can see from that picture, there are camps along the way. Those are stages. And you really have to stop at those stages in order to adjust, simply to adjust to the elevation. Your body can't go to 19,000 feet. When you grew up at sea level, it can't go there automatically. You've got to take the altitude in stages. And I can tell you from personal experience, going from sea level to 10,000 feet hurts. You don't want to go there in one jump. You probably want to go to something like 7,000 feet, 6,000 or 7,000 feet, and then go up, and then go up, and then go up, and then go up. But it's all along the way. You're in the case of a climb up Mount Everest, your body is adjusting to the lack of oxygen. Similarly, a business has to grow in stages so that you can absorb one change and then the next change and then the next change and then the next change in a systematic kind of way. Now, you don't have to know every step in advance. The path will unfold. Now, I like to say having a guide will get you there sooner with fewer wrong turns, but the path is there and you can choose to take it and take 20 years to get there, or you can choose to take 5 years to get there. The guide will help you get there quicker with less muss and fuss, but a person can figure it out and can get there, but there are certain things that have to be completed along the way, and we're going to look at what those things are. So the way I've got this categorized is there are 6 basic steps to get to the place where you are completely absentee, if that's what you want to get to. There is a mastery step. This is the foundational step. This is kind of like getting to the 6,000 foot level so that your body can adjust to the change in density and oxygen content. These are putting things in place that facilitate continuing a path forward. We'll talk about those in more detail here in a minute. The next phase we call niche. This is building predictable cash flow. This is getting you to a place where you know how to build the machine that makes money so that you can advance your business through the next phases. The third step is leverage. This is taking what we did in mastery and turning it into real systems with technology and a lot more sophistication. The goal is to get efficiencies out of the things that we're doing and build time and money efficiency in. The fourth step is to build the team, to scale the team up for capacity so that you've got the capacity you need for the steady income, the penetration into your market, all the things that are necessary, as well as building a leadership team that knows how to make the decisions that you've been making all along. And that allows us to put a general manager in place, maybe extrapolate into some other divisions because there are some other products that facilitate success for this business, and then move on and enjoy the results. This is where we get to the passive income stage, and we can start to do the things that give us personal satisfaction. This is where the massive results really are. Now, that is a system in and of itself. We tend to use a couple of other systems along the way. We talk about the 5 ways, which we were going to get into in some depth. We also talk about the 4 ways, which are a series of recommendations, if you will, and strategies, if you will, in those 4 categories. We're not going to get into very much depth on those, but those are applied to gain efficiencies along the way. So let's talk about the first one. The first one is mastery. And the purpose of mastery is to get from chaos to control. Many businesses find themselves getting stuck because the owner can no longer keep up with all of the things he or she has to do. There's so much to do, so little time. They feel wrung out, they get burned out. It's a terrible experience. And almost everybody gets into this at some place along the way. So what we're going to talk about, the purpose of this section of mastery is really to put a foundation in place so that you don't go through the burnout. You don't go through the frustration of having too many responsibilities all at the same time. And it does take some disciplined thinking up front. It feels premature in some cases, but if you don't do it, it's too late when you get there. This is where we're going to go into those 4 categories. Now, the first area to master is where you're going. What's your business goal? Where do you want to take it to? Now, I showed you the Everest chart. Think of the peak of Mount Everest as your destination. What is the really massive goal that you really, really, really want to achieve? Do not think in terms of extrapolation from where I am now. Think in terms way beyond that. Things you don't know how to get there, that's okay. That gives us a target to shoot at, and we can work at how do we get there. There are ways to build that roadmap so that we can get you there. A second is money mastery. This is the one that Jeff referred to with the awareness of actual figures and numbers. You've got to know where the money is. You've got to know where it's coming from. You've got to know where it's going to. And you've got to know in particular how you can use it to make more quickly. Similarly with time, it's just another resource of the same, except time is even more limited than money is. You can always make more time. It's really hard to get on the internet and buy a bag of time. And so we have to think about how do you get the most value out of the time you've got. And it's a matter of sitting down and just very carefully plotting out what it is you have to be doing, which is what gets us into destination or delivery mastery, rather. Delivery mastery is how do we do what we do? This is not just about how do we deliver the product or the service. This includes how do we find leads? How do we make customers from leads? How do we get paid? How do we recruit people? All of that is included in delivery mastery, and in some way or another has to be accounted for. I can't count the number of business owners I see who have been trapped either because they did not map out their delivery processes well enough, or they did not map out their money processes tightly enough, and they got stuck because they couldn't manage those 2 things. And this is all about learning how to manage those things. Once you've got delivery mastery taken care of, time mastery becomes much more easy, but all of it has to be pointed at the right destination. So we're going to start by asking you to think for a minute about what is your business goal. Now, I don't need you to write that into the chat box, but I'd really like you to sit down with a piece of paper and write it out. What is your business goal? And please, I'm going to say this again, don't hold yourself back by thinking in terms of, gee, if I just got to the next step. No. Think big. What is a vision of something way beyond what you know how to do? We'll find a way to get you there. It's a case of having a direction to point yourself in. This particular picture is really what happens when a forced liquidation happens, a fire sale kind of liquidation happens. It doesn't have to be that way, although many people seem to choose it. Now, going on with destination mastery. There is no use going out to build a business if you don't know where you're going. Otherwise, you're just going in circles. And I'm going to use COVID or no COVID. The destination does not have to change. The only thing that has to change is the path. So we focus on the destination and we find where the obstacles are, where the bottlenecks are, and we work around those bottlenecks so that we can get to the destination. We focus on the destination, not how you're currently getting there. Don't get married to the current process. Get married to the end result you're looking for. And you can't dream too big. I'm sorry, there is no dreaming. There's no such thing as dreaming too big. There is such a thing as dreaming too small. Now, Money Master, I'm going to say it again. If you want to manage something, you got to measure it. This is the only way you get there, and you've got to understand. You don't have to be an accountant, but you do have to understand how to read accounting statements and what they mean, and you're going to drive your business from your accounting statements. The key to money mastery really is budgeting and reporting. It really starts with understanding what the reports mean, how they're broken up, what they're intended to do. And this doesn't mean invented money reports. This means the traditional, generally accepted accounting principle statements, the P&L statement, the balance sheet, and the statement of cash flows. Start with those. Those are really important. There's another set of numbers I'm going to show later on that are equally as important, but for a different reason. They will help you build a money generating machine. These will help you know what's working and what's not working. Budgeting becomes a tool. Once you understand how the reports work, then budgeting becomes a tool, and you can use budgets to take yourself anywhere because you know what you need to spend by then in order to achieve a particular set of results. This is how this graph is one way that financial numbers can be looked at. It helps you decide where you're at and where you need to get to. That BE is an abbreviation for break even. If you look at the bottom line, the light green line, that's a net profit line that shows it going across the 0 point as the number of units produced increases. That horizontal line there is the number of units produced. Below break even, you're losing money. Above break even, you're making money. Your goal is to be making money and as much of it as you can. There is such a thing as a max utilization. So for a given set of production resources, you can only go so far before you need to invest in more resources. And then you have to relook at this chart a little bit differently with that investment. So that becomes a planning process. In your thinking, Jeff, about your business plan question, all of these things have to be incorporated into your business planning process. How will you do what you're going to do? What resources will you need to do that with? What strengths do those resources need to have? What weaknesses do you need to account for? How much money will you need in order to operate that? And therefore, how much money do you need to be bringing in order to make that? I'm going to use the word profitable. And I know you're in a position where you're doing a nonprofit. Doesn't matter. You still need to be accumulating resources so that you can invest more resources in more growth. So it changes the nomenclature a little bit, but the concept stays the same. All right. That takes us to time mastery. So this is the one where you are really limited on what you can do in terms of getting more time. So it comes down to figuring out how can you get the most value out of the time that you have. So we have to identify, and this is where systems really and their delivery mastery really matters, is you have to understand what are the high priority tasks you have? And then how can you get them done, preferably by somebody else? Because sooner or later, you're going to have too many of them to do for you to be able to do them yourself. And if you attempt to do them all yourself, or any large number of them yourself, you run out of the time to get them done. So I actually know businesses that neglect to send invoices because they are too busy doing work. Well, what does that do for their cash flow? And when you ask them how's their cash flow, they always gulp and say, well, I never have enough. Well, gee, I wonder why that is. So this is a case of sitting down and really identifying what are the key activities that need to be done no matter what, and when do they need to be done by, and then how do I get them onto my schedule so that I make sure they get done. And oh, by the way, if I can get somebody else to do them for me, then I can move on to the more important tasks about how do I grow this venture beyond where it is right now. High productivity is the real key. We like to talk about a time target, and the one way we look at this is there are activities that we see that are not urgent and not important. And we tend to think of those as a distraction. A good example, of course, would be video games or reading the news. Those are very good distractions. Don't help us get us to where we're trying to go, but they're great distractions. Then there's things that are urgent and not important. I tend to find those as a bit of a delusion of feeling important because they're urgent. These might be things like a phone call from a friend to go out for dinner tonight, or maybe just chat for the fun of chatting. This is where the social activity jumps in. It really feels fun, and it's a nice relaxation, and it makes our ego feel really good, but doesn't get us towards our goals. Then we can get into things that are urgent and important. One thing that comes to mind is doing taxes. And long around April 1, taxes are pretty urgent. They're pretty important and we need to get them done. But if we wait until April, then they're pretty urgent. And that means we're going to have to spend a lot of time that we would rather be spending working on customer acquisition or working on other things that grow our business, which taxes do not. So we get into the scenario where we've got this demand on our time, but it really gets in the way of what we need to get done, which is grow our businesses. So we want to find a way to get those done in casual time before they become urgent. So if we can start working on important stuff that's going to be important, and we can get it done before it becomes urgent, then we can do it in times of the day and times of the week that are not critical time, and we can find a much better use. So this means we've got to start looking at our calendar in a much more strategic manner and figure out what are those activities that need to be done, which are the times we need to be working on customer acquisition, which are the times we need to be working on customer delivery of customer product or customer service, which are the times to be working on admin that does not get in the way of customer acquisition and customer delivery. So this is how we have to start thinking about things, is how do we break up our day and break up our week in ways that allow us to use our time much more strategically. This is where working on our business is in the not urgent but important area. And that's where we really want to focus our efforts and make sure we're being really strategic on what we're doing with that amount of time during the week. Now, it doesn't mean every day is the same. We might juggle things around, but it is a manner of looking at the calendar in a very careful way and knowing what are the things that are critical to growing our business. The last category, but not the least, is, are you delivering consistently? This is really, really vital. Our customers expect consistency. If they're going to give a referral, they want to know that you're going to be delivering the very same experience that they got, because that's really what they're referring, is the experience they got. And if you're giving different experiences to different customers, then they're going to be getting much more nervous about referring you. The other piece of this gets down to efficiency and effectiveness. How do you know that you're delivering the very best way you can with the least amount of resources possible? And we get into taking a look at building flowcharts. And I know that's not completely readable because it wasn't intended to be in this kind of a format, but that is a flowchart that we built for a business a few years back. It would happen to be in a trades business that had a couple of different ways of delivering product. So we had to look at a couple of different ways of how they delivered. The owner had never figured out how to consistently plan his work. And it wasn't until we laid it out at this level that all of a sudden he realized he was using some of his people inefficiently. And so we were able to squeeze more product out, if you will, with the same size team, because we were able to lay out a more efficient way to use his people. Now, this happened to be the operations side of his business. We did a similar chart for the sales side of his business because it was similarly complicated. And this is how you take a look at your business, is you sit down and map it out and look at how do the pieces fit together. Then you can sit down and start to look at who are the people you need, and not by name, but by skills, by attitudes, by strengths. And you can start to map out what does your organization structure need to be once you start getting a pretty good feel about how the pieces look. Can you imagine a business owner not wanting predictable cash flow? So what we're going to talk about is the factors that help a business generate predictable cash flow. And it starts with, what is a niche? And I like to think of a niche as a way of running a business so that you have little or no price competition. Now, whenever I talk to business owners, they always are thinking about how to get a lower price, how to get a lower price, how to get a lower price. And going for a lower price is really a race to go out of business. It's really a race to the bottom. There's always going to be somebody who will set their prices just a little bit lower. And there's no need for it. If you sit down and understand your market and your customers and realize that not everybody is your customer. It's kind of funny sometimes you ask people who their customers are and they'll tell you people with skin. Yeah, maybe. The people that they serve have to have skin, but not everybody with skin is going to be their customer. And we're going to talk a little bit about why that is. But first, what I want to bring up is that the process of creating a niche involves setting up a unique selling proposition, USP. And the unique selling proposition is, you hear the words target marketing, you hear the words focused marketing, there's all kinds of buzzwords around this. The essence is we're looking for a uniqueness, and then we're setting it and locking it in with a guarantee. We're going to talk about what does uniqueness mean in the next slide. The key to the guarantee. Business owners fear giving guarantees because it means risk. But it doesn't mean risk if you really understand your product and you really understand your customer and you set up the words of a guarantee that you can meet every time. And then you make sure you've got the processes in place to actually meet that guarantee. So this is, again, getting into processes. Now, here is a sample map of a niche. What you're looking at is a perceptual map for the product called soft drinks. The ovals represent groupings of kinds of customers. And they were developed with statistical surveys and observations. So you've got males in an age group, you've got females in an age group, and then you've just got people in general age groups. That doesn't mean every individual fits into those ovals. That just means that a large percentage of each of those groupings does, and that's okay. If you look at the upper left quadrant, you will see that females 15 to 30 years are being served by 4 different products. And what's amusing to me is they're being served by 4 different products, 2 products each of 2 different companies. So in a way, those 2 companies are cannibalizing themselves by trying to serve the same group with such a plethora of product. They would probably each be more profitable if they cut 1 product, but they've chosen to do it this way. On the other hand, if you go down to the lower right quadrant, there is a group of 5 to 15-year-olds that is well served by a single product. That's a fairly efficient way of serving. If you look in the center, you will see a grouping of 30 to 50-year-olds that's not served at all. And going down to the lower left quadrant, there's another grouping of 50-plus-year-olds. I suppose you could say 7-Up is somewhat serving that group and somewhat serving the 5 to 15-year-old group, but it doesn't seem to be very efficiently serving anything. This is a case of sitting down and picking out who are the customers you serve best. There are some ways to go about this. Certainly surveys and questionnaires help a lot, but it also helps a lot if you just take a look at who are your best clients, who have been your best clients over time, and how do you serve them best. And maybe you should redesign your business around those kinds of groupings. So now we are going to get into where this can be really, really efficient and effective at producing a machine to make money with. So there's a variety of times out there where the auto manufacturers build different cars and put them on the same chassis. And that provides a little bit of parts efficiency on their part if they can use the same chassis for multiple cars. A more recent one is the VW Golf and the Audi R8. There have been many others along the way. These just happen to be 2 relatively recent ones. The key is what we're going to talk about is a chassis that works for any business. A key factor of making this process work is to learn how to think in terms of testing and measuring, because there is no one strategy that's going to work first time, every time, guaranteed. And it can often be not the strategy, but the way the strategy was implemented. So for example, an advertisement has 3 components: the headline, the offer, and the copy. And the headline is oriented to a target market. So who's your niche that you're targeting it towards? The offer is also oriented towards the target market. And then the copy helps the target market, the individuals in the target market, understand that they are the ones being addressed and that this offer is relevant to them, and then they have to decide whether they take it. Well, someplace in there, you may have the wrong headline for the target market you're pursuing. You may have the wrong offer. You may have poor copy. And so you've got plenty of opportunities to test and measure so that you can get better results. It wasn't necessarily about the media that you put the ad in. It could have been the ad. And so how do we look at those? And that's where the testing and measuring process comes in. Now, most business owners, and I'm going to challenge the most because it's not all, most business owners know how many customers they have. Most know what their sales are, or their revenue. Many know how much profit that they make. And I will say there are many that don't as well. But it doesn't matter. Those are just results. So what we want to do is get into a process that enables us to take control of results. So here is a formula. If you look, the red variables there in that formula were the ones I just talked about, the number of customers, the dollars of sales, and the dollars of profit. It is very hard to build strategies that are directly relatable to growing those. Whereas if we break it down into smaller chunks, we can. We can build strategies around how to get more leads by how we market and advertise. We can get more customers by improving how well we sell and improving our conversion rate. We can build more revenue, not only by building the number of customers we've got, but by increasing the number of times they buy from us, or increasing the average sell price. We can increase the profit margin not only from increasing the revenue, but from doing things that enable us to produce our products and services more efficiently, hence increasing the profit margin. So what we're going to do is we're going to put some numbers on this so you can actually see this conceptually. So if we start with a sample business, here is a business that gets 4,000 leads, converts 25% of them, and therefore has 1,000 customers. 1,000 customers, average 2 purchases per year per customer, with an average dollar sale of $100. Therefore, we've got a revenue of $200,000. The efficiency factor we're at is basically producing a 25% margin. Therefore, the owner is getting a $50,000 profit margin. Okay, so that's a baseline. We now know what the baseline is for this business. What if we worked on increasing those blue variables by 10% each by establishing strategies to improve one by one? So could we increase the number of leads? Well, we got a couple of choices. One is we can take a look at how are we doing it now and improve the efficiencies by which they perform. And that might be a case of sitting down and relooking at the headlines, the offers, and the way we're explaining the offers. Or we can increase the number of methods and invest in more kinds of marketing. So if we do that, we can achieve a 10% increase in the number of leads we get. Okay. We can also improve the efficiency by which we sell. So if we can improve our selling efficiency, we can take the 25% up to 27.5. That's an improvement in conversion rate. So how many customers do we have now? Well, with those two little changes, we've gone up 21% and now have 1,210 customers. Okay, so we're going in the right direction. So if we've got an average of 2 transactions per customer, can we do a better job of learning how to bring them back more often? and maybe get to 2.2 transactions per customer? Can we do a better job of upselling or add-on selling so that our average dollar sale increases? And in this case, to 110. We've gone up 10%. What's our new revenue? Well, in this case, our new revenue is nearly $300,000. That's a 46% increase. Now, once we've grabbed at that, is it possible to become more efficient at how we produce the product or how we produce the service so that our profit margin goes up? In this case, to 27.5%. Remember, we're only going up 10%. We're not going up from 25 to 35 yet. We're just going up 10%. This owner is now taking home $80,525 of profit. That's a 61% increase just by working systematically at improving those 5 variables each a little bit. Now that's cool. Is there any reason we can't do that over and over and over? Now, given an example, I worked with a trades company back some years ago. When I started working with him, he had 700,000 of revenue and 2 employees. By the time we got through the first year, using this basic structure, we had increased his business from 700,000 to 1.2 million. And he had 7 employees. Now, he also took it a little bit further, and that's what we're going to show you next. We took it a little bit further. Over 3 years, he went to 3.2 million, all by focusing his strategies around these numbers. Now, we're going to look at exactly that here. What if we increased these numbers to 100%? This might take several years, might be just a few years. So in this case, can we increase the number of leads by 100%? Well, if we work at the advertising enough, yes. In that particular case, we did. Similarly, we can learn to sell better by focusing on our target market more carefully. Can be one big piece of this, and go to 50%. And in this case, we've gone to 4,000 customers. Now, the number of transactions per customer, can we increase it more? Can we increase it 100% to 4? Well, maybe it's a case of learning how to get really, really good at inviting people back. And oh, by the way, having really, really good things for them to buy so that they will come back. Similarly, with the ability to upsell, there are Sherwin-Williams. If you walked into a Sherwin-Williams store years ago, they used to hand you a checklist of all the possible things you might need doing a painting project. You just walked in for a can of paint, but they hand you this 2-sided sheet of paper with all the possible things that you might need. And of course, you need about 5 or 6 things more than what it was, just the can of paint. So you're going to walk out of there with a whole bag full of stuff besides the can of paint. But that gets our revenue up. In this case, 3.2 million. Now, all by itself, that's going to increase the margin that you take home. But if we really work on the efficiencies well, we can increase the profit margin significantly. This is a way that you can turn your scaling up process into a machine. Now, there's a catch. That first $200,000 business plausibly could be done with 1 person, maybe 1.5, but it is possible to do many cases, or it's possible to do a $200,000 a year business with 1 person. It is probably not possible to do a $3.2 million business with one person. So we're going to have different people we're going to have a team. So we have to think about how many people does it take to drive 8,000 leads? How many people does it take to serve 4,000 clients? How many people does it take to keep things moving administratively inside of that? Means all the invoices, all the collections, and on and on and on and on. Now we get to efficiency of the business. And so what we're going to want to do is set up systems for everything. And we're not going to dwell a lot of time on this because the bulk of it needed to be in the things we've already spoken to. But what we're really looking for is saving yourself time, energy, and money. That's really where we're going with systems. The categories of work we're going to be looking at are people in education, systems and technology, delivery and distribution, accounting, testing, measuring, the whole bit. And I'll tell you, education is a big piece of this. We need to be constantly training. And I know we run a risk of training somebody so that they can leave, but if we don't train them, they might stay. And if we don't train them and they stay, we often wind up doing their work for them. And that's not terribly efficient. And we can take advantage of technology and we can do other things. The accounting is a big piece of this. That's where a big opportunity lies. There are 9 key steps to systemizing a business. And I'm going to run through them like this. Most people, when they systemize a business, think in terms of how-tos first. And that's all well and good, but if you notice, the how-to systems in this list is number 8 out of 9 steps. And the problem here is if you haven't done the first 8, or the first 7 rather, then you may be doing how-tos in the wrong direction. I'm thinking specifically of a business I was working with a week ago that hasn't really used the vision statement and the culture statement to think about how to put their how-tos in a way that really addresses the culture. And the problem is he's lost about 50% of his production capacity because people have left because the culture wasn't what they had hoped it would be. The culture isn't what he had tried to create because he had tried to keep his hands on everything. So rather than systemize the business and help people have a place in the business, he was trying to be the business, but have all these extra people. And he had about 20 people around him. And now he's got a massive production process and a massive backlog because he allowed it to get out of control because he didn't incorporate those first 3 into his thinking process when he was setting up his how-tos. In fact, he needed to be the one to set up all the how-tos rather than harness them to do it for him. A lot of this can be done by the team if you realize you can harness and get your mind wrapped around that as your focus is how to get them to do it for you. So this becomes all part of it. And the last piece of this is the management systems. So how are you going to keep them focused on doing it the way the system says? How are you going to keep them focused on improving the efficiencies and the effectivenesses so that you're always looking at improvement as opposed to you having to make the decisions all by yourself? So this is the key to 9 steps to systemizing a business. You really do need, it doesn't need to be a cute vision statement. It doesn't need to be a fancy, quick 1 sentence. It can be quite a bit as long as it's clear and as long as it's communicated and as long as all decisions are built around it. Similarly with the culture. What is the culture you want to have, and what are you doing to make sure you've got that culture in place? Is everybody being held accountable to maintaining that culture? And that's the beginning. Then we get to the goals, and we get to the organization chart. Then we get to the positional contracts. All of those become a piece of it. And Jeff, going back to your question about a plan, all of these need to be accounted for in your plan. Personally, I would start with the 5 ways as the core, baseline the current production numbers, and then extrapolate out what do you want them to be in 2 years or 3 years or 5 years. And then what are the things you need to have in place that achieve that, including the numbers of people in each of the categories. And once you've got that in place, the pieces start to assemble themselves. So that can be the 5 ways can actually become the core of a business plan. All right, now we're going to talk about a very key factor of growth in a business, and that's building a team. You cannot build a business for sale if you aren't building a team. And the team really gets you to a place, if you build it well, to a place where the business can work without you. Now, just for fun, let's think about your team. And I've heard this said in many ways by many different business owners and many different business leaders. Most employees are motivated, energetic, committed, enthusiastic, and loyal, except for the 8 hours a day they work for you. That particular quote's taken from Tom Peters out of one of his books, but I have heard that observation many times, many places over several decades, because it's so true. And the key is the leader's ability to engage their team. And that's up to the leader to engage them. They don't engage themselves. Now, a way to think about a business, when a business starts up, it starts up with an owner, usually with customers all by themselves. So the owner gets really comfortable serving customers at a particular pace, at a particular tempo, all by himself. And he starts to create knowledge in his head, and only he knows what's in his head. But then he gets busy, and then he hires somebody to help him with that busyness. And then he expects who he hires to know all of the same things he does, because it was obvious, then everybody knows that, right? Only it never works that way. The people he hires come in with their own experiences, their own observations, their own opinions. And if there aren't systems pre-prepared with instructions and key measuring sticks along the way, then the team members that have been hired don't have a clue what's inside the owner's head. So the right time is for the owner to think ahead before he hires the team and before he gets too busy, to start documenting and writing down how he does what he does, so he can use that when he starts hiring people to train his team. If the owner learns how to spend his time teaching and supervising his team instead of serving customers himself and trying to have his fingers on all of the decisions, then he can teach the team to represent him, be him, and he can build as large a team and scale up his ability to get stuff done much more significantly, and he can grow his business much more significantly, as long as he's thought of it all along, right from the beginning, that he has to look at how he is going to build a team right from the beginning. With that thought, there are 6 basic keys to building a winning team. This first one starts with strong leadership. This has nothing to do with screaming leadership or yelling or being mean to people. This has entirely to do with how strong is the vision and how persistent is the owner at focusing on making decisions directly related to what the vision is all about. Incorporating and enrolling the team into helping them set the goals, helping them create rules of the game. This is where culture comes in. And then helping to facilitate an action plan. The action plan includes flowcharts. The action plan includes organization charts. The action plan works at who does what and how soon does it need to be done, how quickly does work need to be accomplished, and what does the handoff need to look like from person to person so that everybody knows how to do what they need to do. Eventually, the owner reaches a point where he's got enough of a team working. He needs to let them learn things the same way he did, which means a little bit of trial and error. And he's got to therefore give them room to try, make mistakes, and learn how to fix them. And once he's reached a stage where that can be somewhat self-sustaining, he's going to want 100% commitment and involvement by each team member. But to do that, he has to earn it. And he has to earn it by including them in the decision-making processes so that they own the strategies, they own the plans, they own the goals, and they will do everything possible to make them successful. And that's up to the leader to engage them in that way. Okay. Now, the key to this is winning teams know how to get the right people on the right bus going to the right destination. And that's where the owner really gets to, is he has to be focused on getting enough of the right people in the right places into his organization, and then eventually systemizing that. Once he gets to that stage, he can install a general manager. Now, a general manager, some people call it a chief operating officer, some people call it this, some people call it that. What it means in this case is somebody who handles all of the day-to-day decisions in all parts of the business, all the week-to-week decisions, all the month-to-month decisions. In other words, the owner just has to get reports and periodically check in with the general manager. Could be once a month, could be once a quarter, just to see how progress is going and making sure everything's on track. Now then, does that sound like an absentee owner? And this is a stage where the business is in a very good place to either provide a passive income to the owner or be sold. And that's a decision up to the owner, a choice the owner can make that allows him to either get the most value from a sale or to continue to achieve the passive income. And he can arrange for the general manager to scale that business up to whatever passive income he wants. Those are choices. If you want to think about it, Richard Branson is our role model. A key context to put this in is probably Richard Branson. In a manner of speaking, he built all of his businesses more or less down this kind of path. Maybe not with Action Coach, but he found his way through it. And what his observation has been is if you learn to run one business successfully, there's no reason you can't learn to run any number of other businesses at the same time. because the principles are all the same. And that is absolutely true. Any business can be built using this strategy, this structure. It's straightforward. The question is, where do you want to go? And so I'm going to put that this way. I can guarantee in 12 months you'll arrive. It'll actually be more. The real question is, where? Do you want to be a slave to your business? Or do you want to be a business that's going in the direction of absentee owner? Now, absentee owner has a choice. He can participate, but he doesn't have to. I had a business, I've got a couple of businesses in this category that are getting to a place where the owner is satisfied with the income they're making. They love being involved with the process and the product, and they have no intention of becoming absentee. That's okay too. It's a choice. What lifestyle do you want? I'm thinking of a personal services business I worked with a bit back. She grew her business from herself full-time and 4 part-time people to herself and 14 full-time providers and some administrative people. And then she stopped because that was what she wanted. That's fine. Don't have to go all the way. But she got her goal, and she's making more money than she's ever dreamed of making by going down that path. Thinking about that, there's 2 directions you can go. You can work at improving your own business on your own, or you can get massive results much more quickly in your business, And we can talk about options if you want to. And so I will show those to you and what they look like. The 3 most common categories of ways I help people through those strategies starts on the right with one-to-one mentoring. That's for the larger businesses. And I would say over about $1 million would be in the right range. That'll be a very personal one-on-one kind of process. It's the fastest. There's another category that's more of a group coaching program. We work in small groups, and it's limited to 4 businesses max. Each business tends to learn from the others there. Generally speaking, under 1 million is a good size for those kind of businesses, for those kinds of products. I actually think there is some overlap here. Some smaller businesses have done one-to-one. Some larger businesses have done Mentor Club. And then blocks of hours, I work sometimes with business owners on a single aspect of their business. That's most commonly with business under 150,000 of revenue. Doesn't matter. We can always talk about that. I've always also worked with multi-million-dollar businesses in that category. Just to fix one thing. And so those are ways to approach it. Anybody who's interested in creating those massive results in their business, I offer a free 1-hour strategy session. What we'll do is focus in on the things that are exactly relevant to their business at that time. And I always guarantee that they'll walk away with 3 or 4 actionable ideas or strategies they could implement immediately. Anybody who does, take me up on that. I will provide this document. It's a picture of a document, which is kind of a checklist of things that we would look at through the course of the 6 steps. That will be part of the result that they will get from doing that. And so I'll ask, what questions do you have? Oh, thank you for asking that, Jeff. How would you recognize someone in need of assistance that you could introduce? Any business owner who wants to grow more income more quickly for themselves, any business owner who talks about struggles going on inside of their team, needing some help, smoothing that out, or any business owner who complains in some way about being too busy, got too many balls in the air, trying to, and in fact, might even be thinking about downsizing to be able to make more time in their lives. Any of those guys would be great. I especially like to work with people in the construction and trades industries because I have a background in that personally. Yeah, the pains are going to be not making enough cash for themselves, not having enough time in their lives because the business has them too busy, or having too much dynamics and drama going on inside the team. Those are really the most common pains that they suffer. And then we can have a conversation about those and we can make a decision if I can help them or not. And the decision has to be in their court. But those are generally the three pains. The most common one is not making enough money. But often in the other two are factors in why they're not making enough money. So if you know somebody that wants to buy a bigger boat down on the bay and doesn't have enough money to do it, that's a good one too. Are there positive parts of pain? In a way, yeah. It's an incentive to do something better. Pain is an indication that we've got something to learn. So pain's not necessarily bad. It's just a symptom. And if we recognize the symptom, then we can learn to do something different. And I will help them figure out what that is and guide them through a process to get there. That's really my role, is to guide them through a process to overcome a pain. And that's usually a learning about something new, a new skill. And so I'm going to ask, if you felt some value, you learned some stuff, there was something that you got that was helpful to you today, please do me a favor and help the next person see a review. I prefer LinkedIn or Google reviews, but help them see a review that helps them make a decision to come to the next one. And so I'll quote Brad Sugars. You know you made a great decision when it brings up either fear or excitement. That's usually a clue that you're ready for some learning. And Jim Rohn, never wish your life were easier. Wish that you were better. Work harder on yourself than you do on your job. And so I'm going to say, now's time to get into action, guys. Go for it. And have a wonderful time. And thank you all very much. And thank you, Jeff. Good questions.